The Sports Time Podcast.
All right, I am pleased to be joined by Nabil and Asif of the Bears, Birds, and Brews podcast. How's it going, guys?
How's it going, man? Thank you for having us on.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much for being here. We're doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, especially less than a month is when football officially begins. Now, it already technically happened with the Hall of Fame game, but I was just glad to have football back, even though the game wasn't really that fun to watch. But again,
Yeah.
like I said, I'm just glad football is back. And again, less than a month, the Cowboys will be taking on the Buccaneers. But before we start talking about that, we'll also mention a little Oklahoma and Texas and just about the whole college football landscape at the moment. But before we start talking about that, if you guys want to talk more about your podcast, where we can find you, all that good stuff.
Yeah. Thank you again for having us on. We're Bears, Birds, and Brews. We're a podcast that goes into craft beer, football. We do talk about Chicago and Atlanta sports a lot, but it's just a fun podcast about us enjoying craft beers, and sometimes we enjoy too many craft beers and yell about our sports teams. So it could be down to me talking about Jay Cutler or Mitch Trubisky, or Asif talking about 28-3. We're gonna talk about our lowest moments and highest moments at the same time.
Yeah. And I'll just add that, Bears, Birds, and Brews, at Bears, Birds, and Brews on social media, Chicago Bears, Atlanta Falcons Craft Beer. We're an Atlanta-based podcast, and Bill and I both live in Metro Atlanta. However, we were both born in Chicago. So hence, it's a very organic development that we have on our podcast. It's all very organic. We have roots in both places, and we have love for both teams and both towns. And, of course, who doesn't love a nice cold craft beer also?
Yeah. Again, thanks, guys. Thanks again for coming on. But before we talk about the NFL, we haven't talked much about this, but the college football in a few years is going to look completely different. Of course, the big news a few weeks ago is Oklahoma and Texas leaving the Big 12 for the SEC. I was stunned that this is actually going to happen. It seems like there's a good chance the Big 12 might not exist. I think it will, but there's a good chance that it might not exist. But what do you guys think about Oklahoma and Texas leaving the Big 12 to go to the SEC? And do you think it's a smart move?
Well, I think it's manifest destiny. I mean, we learned about manifest destiny like in 5th grade, right? To go westward. Well, that's what the SEC is doing. And, eventually the SEC will be every good college football team in the U.S. outside of Clemson. And then every year will be an SEC team versus Clemson. But yes, I think this is great for college football, great for the SEC, horrible for the Big 12. But I do think you're right. I don't think the Big 12 is going away, but it's not good for the Big 12. Asif?
Yeah, I think if the Big 12 does dissolve or evaporate, maybe it can go back to being the Big 8, which is what it was originally, even though they don't have Missouri anymore. But you can make it go from Big 12 to Big 8, or you can combine with a Pac-10 to become the Pac-12 or the Big 10 or the Big 12 or the Pac-12, whatever, just do all that maneuvering. And then lastly, as an SEC fan, it's great that we started with this because, like I said, we're an Atlanta-based podcast. So we are in the heart of SEC country with no championships to our names with the Georgia Bulldogs. However, as I went to Mizzou, actually, when they were in the Big 12, and now when I graduated, they moved to the SEC and they moved back home with me. I think it's fine. I mean, to be honest, I don't really care to see Texas or Oklahoma in the SEC. And to be honest, I don't want them to win either. It's cool that they're in. Great spotlight, great exposure, great revenue, all that stuff, and academically fine institutions. But I don't want Texas or Oklahoma to win the SEC championship ever. Like, I'll take Nick Saban winning 5 more championships before we see Texas win one or Oklahoma win one. And maybe even Georgia or Missouri might get some action too. But that's kind of my stance. Like, welcome aboard, but this is the SEC, the original SEC, and I want to keep it that way in terms of who's dominating the conference and college football as a whole.
I am curious, though, how the Longhorn Network is going to work with this, because I think originally the Longhorn Network was excluded from Big 12 revenue sharing. I wonder if that was negotiated in.
Yeah, I kind of forgot about the Longhorn Network, and I'm not sure. I should go check that out. I didn't do enough research on that, but yeah, I think because I know that's a huge moneymaker for Texas. I know that.
Mm-hmm.
So I would assume though it would just go to the SEC, and I'm assuming Texas would get all the. I don't know if SEC would actually get any profits on that. So, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I don't think Texas is going to have that much success in the SEC. I mean, they barely had enough success in the Big 12, and it seemed like Oklahoma would win the Big 12 every year, and then they'd go to the college football playoff and just get smacked. But do you think Texas will ever get back to what they were, 10 years ago or 15 years ago?
I think Texas has had just a bad run with coaches not having like the right amount of like time. And with, college football, unless you're, Jim Harbaugh right now, no one has time. Everyone is like win in 2 years or you're out. And that's not how that's not how college football works. So I think right now they have, what's his name? Is it Steve Sarkisian or is it the other dude? Is it Steve Sarkisian at Texas? So I think that was like a panic hire, but I think they're going to be looking to hire someone new in about 2 years. And now that you're in the SEC, like they're going to be able to scout the best coaches in college football on a regular weekly basis. You're going to be seeing Alabama's coaches once a year at least. So, I think that is something that's going to possibly help them bounce back sooner. Is it going to be a long road being in the SEC? Yeah, it will be. But, it'll help with recruiting and it'll help with finding the best coaching talent to get the best recruits. This is what I think.
Yeah, I'll just chime in real quickly and say I actually kind of disagree with the bill, respectfully, of course, I'm a good friend of mine. But I disagree in that, Texas has always been a marquee program, right? Like they have Matthew McConaughey, they have, the live mascot. They have 100,000 person stadium. They're in Austin. The Texas Longhorns football. It is a marquee program in college football, no matter what. You asked, will they return to greatness? I don't know if Steve Sarkisian is going to get them there. There are high hopes for him, for people who he's worked for in the past. And then obviously with the boosters down there, I thought Tom Herman was on a great trajectory. But like Nabil said, it's like a 2 to 3 year thing. And if you don't get it done in 2 to 3 years, you're out, as we literally saw with Tom Herman. As for joining the SEC, I think it's actually going to be harder for them to win, to be honest, because now just to get to the national championship game, depending on how the conferences align, but just to get to the national championship game, you're going to have to beat Alabama and or Georgia. You have to beat Oklahoma, which you have to do every year. Then you throw maybe a good Auburn and LSU team in the mix, and Florida. Like, they made their path to greatness even harder by joining the SEC, whereas if they would have ran the table in the Big 12, I think they pretty much have a playoff bid automatically. And now, like I said, you got Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Oklahoma in your way, and LSU occasionally. I don't think it's any easier for them.
I do wonder how this is going to impact the expansion of playoffs, because I think the playoff expansion happened with the expectation of giving automatic bids to the big conferences. And the automatic bid for the Big 12 would have either been Texas and Oklahoma, on a yearly basis. But, there could have been like a one-off with TCU or Oklahoma State, but normally it'd be Texas or Oklahoma. Now that both of them are gone, I wonder if they're going to reconsider how that automatic bid is going to work. Because, right now the SEC should have 3 automatic bids almost every year, but they're not going to get that.
Right. And so exactly like Nabil just said, I think that's a great supplement to the point that I just made, which is exactly what I was trying to say. And then the only other thing I want to add too is I don't think it does anything for them in terms of recruiting. They are, again, University of Texas, the Texas Longhorns. And as anybody who watches college football closely knows, like Texas is one of the best high school football states in the country. So Texas didn't need the SEC to recruit. They never have, and they never will. I don't know if it makes things easier or worse for them in terms of recruiting, but it's also like a non-factor as far as I'm concerned, because they're Texas and they're a big time program, no matter which way you put it. And like Nabil just said, it's even harder to win there now. So again, it might hurt them more than it helps them, even though they are Texas.
It could be the revenue, but I'm not sure. The revenue would definitely be going higher. But yeah, any more thoughts on, the Texas and Oklahoma with you, JJ?
I just think that it was a bad move for both programs because Oklahoma used to dominate in the Big 12 the last 5 or 6 years, or even I guess the 5, 6, 7 years. And I guess you don't necessarily need to play defense that much anymore because you saw Alabama last year. Their defense was great and all, but they were driven mostly by their offense. So, I mean, I just think that Oklahoma and Texas should have stayed put, in my opinion. But unless they see something with the Big 12 that, of course, the Big 12 is not what it used to be, I just think it was a bad move. I kind of wanted to mention Oklahoma, but I kind of want to mention this before. Now that the Big 12 in 2025, they're going to have 10 teams. I wonder if they can stay alive because I heard reports that Iowa State, of course, they had reports about them maybe joining the Big 10 if the Big 12 doesn't last. Kansas, I guess, had talks about going to the Big 10, which wouldn't make any sense in football. But if they stay to that 10 team format, if they can expand a little bit, get a few more teams, do you think a team like Central Florida, who's tried to move out of the American, and like a team like Cincinnati, do you think they would be good fits in the Big 12?
Central Florida, that's an intriguing one. I mean, yeah, I think if they get the opportunity, they should. Do I think it's gonna? Yeah, I don't see any harm in that, but it won't. They'll be, it won't obviously won't replace Texas or Oklahoma, but with like the recent, how they've been trending and how they did the whole they're the national champions thing, it'd be a good hot team to bring in. Like it's a team that you can bring in that has gotten some noise, that does have a great fan base that could help with the missing revenue at that point. In Northern Iowa, they have like a great following for a long time. So those are two possible replacements that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of at what point do you have the integrity of the conferences and the division, and are you putting student ahead of athlete, or does it become athlete student, or just athlete and part-time student? Because in the sense of Central Florida, okay, we have to go to Central Florida Saturday, then the other Saturday we got to go all the way up to Iowa or Waco, Texas. Then you got to go down to TCU. Then you got to go to Cincinnati. These are kids, they're athletes, they're students, they're not professionals who, hey, Lakers back to back, LA to Boston or whatever, right? Philly to Boston to New York. So I think you have to be mindful of somebody has to play these games and logistics has to be involved. And Central Florida, while sure it's great for the brand and it's great for the revenue and if they want to win, yeah, but then we're not in the business of college athletics. We're more amateur athletics. And I think, the name, image, likeness complicates a lot of that. So I think it becomes a can of worms that you don't want to go into. And like I said, I think the better thing would be to go back to a Big 8. Iowa State, you want out. Kansas, you want out. Okay, we just lost 4 teams. We're the Big 8 again, back to tradition. And then you can kind of do some fun things with that too, right? And you keep it closer to home. So I think that's the way. Downsizing is actually a better way to go, even though financially it might not pay off as much, which is, of course,
I don't see downsizing happening at all. That's too much lost revenue. But yeah, with the NIL, it doesn't really matter. But the NIL, it doesn't really, at this point, we know it's not it's not amateur sports. It's professional football junior at this point. College football is professional football junior. It is pro sports at this point. The number one sport in the United States is football. The number 2 sport is college football. So
yeah, I think you're totally right on that part. I just thought that Central Florida doesn't really make a lot of sense, but just because it doesn't seem like the ACC or the SEC would want them. And what happened a few years ago, I would have loved to actually seen them play a good team and see how good they were, and maybe giving them a chance to actually play in the college football playoff. And then on the other side, you have Cincinnati, which is kind of close to West Virginia, and they would make more sense, I think, than UCF. And you saw how good they were last year, and they took Georgia all the way until they. And so I just think that Cincinnati would make more sense. It was just kind of guessing to see what teams would fit the Big 12 most if they wanted to replace Texas and Oklahoma. But
At this point, I don't think college football needs geographical bounds. It made sense before when travel was a lot more difficult when college football first started. At this point, I mean, we have SEC teams all the way in Missouri. I mean, that's not Southeast Conference, but it is what it is. I won't be surprised in a couple of years if the only good team in the Big Ten is Ohio State still for a while. That SEC reaches out to Ohio State, and we just have an SEC championship every year, and that's the national championship. Which is and that's I'm saying that tongue in cheek, but I was thinking it could possibly happen.
Yeah, it does kind of seem like it just pretty much seems like right now college football is just going the way where the top 5 conferences or the top 4 conferences just expand and start their own league, because the NCAA literally in college football does not have any power compared to what the SEC and ACC. Pretty much Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner, he's the commissioner of college football pretty much. I mean, he has that much power over over Mark Emmert, who is currently the NCAA commissioner. So it's crazy how college football is more controlled by the top 4 conferences, the Big 4. I guess you still consider Big 12 in there. But it's the NCAA clearly, yeah, exactly. It's driven by money. So I guess we'll see what happens within the next few years. It's going to be crazy, that's for sure.
Just one last note on this. I do remember at one point on Mike and Mike, they were talking about, and this is an old thing, so this is how old this was. They were talking about how college football should remove itself from the NCAA to take the next step. That's the next step for college football, because all the college football revenue gets split up amongst the other sports. So the next step for college football to be able to actually grow more is removing itself from the NCAA, because at that point they have no regulations.
Yeah, I totally agree. Do you have anything to add to that, Asif?
Asif, yeah, no,
sorry about that.
No, you're good. I mean, I think the thought of going back a little bit, I think the thought of Cincinnati in the Big 12 or the Big 8 or whatever it becomes would be intriguing, because they've shown that they can be competitive. The only irony, I think, is like, I don't know if you can ever secede, the irony of all this Southeast. And I don't think you can secede from the NCAA, because these guys have to put a uniform on that is registered by the school and the branding and all that stuff. However, it's crazy because the playoffs are expanding, right? I mean, the playoffs did just expand. So again, it's all happening in the same direction. Like these, they're operating in silos when they're really running in the same direction. So I personally would like to see college football stay college football and then the NFL be the NFL, because I think there, of course, is undoubtedly a difference between those two, as we know. And yeah, the college football playoffs just expanded. So for you to expand your conference, why not just win your conference? Then Cincinnati could play in the playoffs. UCF could play in the playoffs. Texas, Oklahoma, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, and LSU could all be in the playoffs, plus Notre Dame, even though they probably don't deserve it. We're going to see the marquee matchups that we want to see for what we want to see them for, which is a title. So, that's also why I don't like college football as much, because I think it's way more complicated than it needs to be. And that's why I like the NFL, personally.
Yeah, I agree. Sorry about that, Asif. I totally messed that name up. So that's my bad. So let's go to the NFL now. You guys were mentioning you guys are Bears and Falcons fans. Let's first start talking about the Bears. They're going to have an interesting season. Aaron Rodgers is returning, but they now have a new quarterback, it looks like, in Justin Fields. But however, I think Andy Dalton's probably going to get the first few starts, and they do play against the Rams, which is going to be a really tough game. How do you see the Bears season going this year? And is there a chance they win the NFC North and at least make it to the NFC Championship game?
Ooh, NFC Championship game? That I don't think so. NFC North, I think a slight possibility, not as good as a possibility before Aaron Rodgers showed back up, obviously. That is, the Packers division to lose at this point. But, just going back to start, let's start at square one. The quarterback room, it's where where everything's going to start and stop at this point. As of now, Andy Dalton is QB1. We all saw the tweet. We know he's QB1. Do I think he's going to remain QB1 for very long? I don't think so. I think Justin Fields is lighting it up at camp. This week, we're going to see the Bears play Miami. And I don't think we're going to see much of Fields or Andy Dalton because I think the Bears are going to put Nick Foles up to potentially try to get him traded to either the Jets or to the Colts. But, going on, next week, I don't know what the dress rehearsal game is going to be. Is it game 2 now or is it game 3? But whatever the dress rehearsal game is, I feel like you're going to see more Justin Fields than we're going to be expecting to. And week 1, probably we're going to see Andy Dalton start, but I won't be surprised if it's going to be a Deshaun Watson thing and Justin Fields comes out the second half. I think Justin Fields can lead us very far this year. Depending on how many games Justin Fields does play, I think we have a wild card, especially with the expanded wild card. If we made it last year, I think the wild card is a very good possibility for us.
Do you have anything to add to that, Asif?
I'm excited for Justin Fields. I'm sure you probably know this, and I'm sure your listeners did too. But just to put it out there, like Justin Fields is actually from Kennesaw, Georgia. So he grew up about 30 minutes from where Nabil and I are right now, even though we're in different parts of town. He was the number 1 recruit in the country coming out of high school. He led his high school team, the Harrison Hoyas, to the state championship, and then he went to Georgia for a year, and he transferred to Ohio State, and then obviously he's with the Bears now. So the irony of him coming full circle, we're trying to get him on our podcast, and if he does, we'll send him over here to you. But no, I'm excited for Justin Fields. I think, like Nabil said, I don't think you can rush into it. Yes, he's going to play soon, and he should play soon. And what I told Nabil on our podcast at Bears, Birds, and Brews last week, which is it's only a steal if you use him, right? Like, you can't say, oh, we got Justin Fields for the 11th pick in the NFL draft, trading up from 20, but we didn't play him until 2.5 years in because we had Andy Dalton and Nick Foles, and we had to honor those contracts. Like, it's only a steal if he comes in week 3, 4, 5 and starts winning games, wins Rookie of the Year. And eventually, maybe, hopefully, within 6 to 7 years, he's playing for an NFC championship, if not more, getting some division titles in there, getting a Super Bowl, experience once or twice in his career, hopefully. So I'm excited for Justin Fields because he's a local guy. I know he's good. I've seen him be good so far. And I wish him nothing but the best. Like I said, like Nabil said, I think you have to be very deliberate about how you do it. You don't need to throw him 0 to 100 week 1, game 1, snap number 1, right? You can ease him into it. I mean, if you want him to play 15 years, like sitting out 1 or 2 quarters in the first week of week 1 is not going to be a big deal in the long run.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's also, the brand new toy that's wrapped up. You're just ready to just let it go and see what happens.
So I'll just chime in real fast. This kind of reminds me of a Michael Vick situation, actually, because the Falcons were in the same situation with Michael Vick. Like, they had Michael Vick. He was the number 1 pick in the draft. He was electrifying. He's not the most electrifying man in sports entertainment. We know that's The Rock. But Michael Vick was the most electrifying man on the football field, and probably still is up until Patrick Mahomes took over in the last year or two. But even Michael Vick sat out for a few games until Chris Chandler eventually passed the reins over to him. So yeah, it's a shiny new toy, but dude, if you bump on the curb and your brand new car, taking it off the lot because you're so excited, what's the point of having that car if you can't even use it right? So that's just my stance on it.
Yeah.
I could kind of see the Bears situation kind of being like what they did a few years ago and I understand Mitch Trubisky was not a good quarterback at all, but I could see where, Mike Glennon, I think, started the first 3 games of the season, and Andy Dalton did the same. Yeah,
like first 6, I think. But yeah, but that was rough. Andy Dalton's a way better quarterback than Mike Glennon was.
I can understand. It just it seems like it's going to end up like that. But yeah, we all know Andy Dalton's a better quarterback than Mike Glennon was, and Andy Dalton's already proved it. I mean, he's played in the postseason a plethora of times. He just couldn't get the win. But yeah, I could just see Justin Fields not playing a few games. Unless Andy Dalton plays really well. I mean, you saw that a few years ago with, I think, when Joe Flacco was the quarterback in Baltimore. I think he started the first 9 games, and then he was eventually replaced by Lamar. But it could be something like that. I don't think Andy Dalton's going to have that much success. And if he is, I feel like Matt Nagy's he's going to force Justin Fields in there because, of course, they did spend a first round draft pick on Justin Fields. So Let's go
Yeah.
down to the Falcons now, and Julio Jones is no longer there in Atlanta. And it seems like they're basically gonna try to rebuild. It seems like, kind of, maybe not. But where do you think the Falcons, or how well do you think the Falcons will do this season?
Man, that's $1 million question, right? I wish I knew. I was actually at the Falcons open practice on Saturday afternoon here at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and the running game looks a lot better. I know you asked about Julio, but I'll say that the running game looks a lot better with Arthur Smith, and that's one thing Falcons fans can look forward to. That being said, also, what the Falcons didn't have the last couple of years is a decent running game that they can rely on, right? Matt Ryan's thrown the ball the most he ever has in his career, for the last couple of years. And so, Julio Jones becomes a premium product in that situation. But again, are you using him to the best of his abilities? Are you using him wisely? And that wasn't happening because the team was not balanced. So when you take that into consideration, I think you look at the Falcons and you say, okay, they have a new identity this year. Yes, they're still potent offense. Yeah, you have Kyle Pitts, you have Calvin Ridley, you got Frank Darby, who actually caught some really nice passes, including a touchdown in the open practice scrimmage on Saturday. And you got Russell Gage, who's been around for a little bit and has good chemistry with Matt Ryan as well. So they're still a potent offense, but they don't have Julio Jones, and everybody knows the saga of the Falcons for the last 5 years, right? The Super Bowl collapse, then the coach gets fired, then the star player gets traded, and now it's on the franchise quarterback to lead them to glory. So I think the Falcons are a more balanced team this year, and maybe not having Julio isn't the worst thing, because it's just a matter of like your other weapons, have a chance to show out. And you did replace him with a guy like Kyle Pitts, who is literally bigger than every player on the third string team, because they put him out there for some third string snaps at the end of practice, and he was by far the biggest one on the field on both sides of the ball. So I think the Falcons will be fine. It's just a matter of the fans have to be patient, because, we deserve better, frankly. I'll just say, as Falcons fans, as Atlanta sports fans, we deserve much, much better than what we've gotten. And the hard part is that with the new coach and the new system and all that stuff coming in, that stuff usually doesn't really click and be its most successful until at least year 2. So like, hey, they already owe me 1 to 2 Super Bowls, but the closest I might even come to getting a playoff appearance might not be until next season. So I think Falcons fans just have to be patient, even though, but at least you have Kyle Pitts, your shiny new toy, to throw out there in the meantime, and hopefully keep some people happy. That's the goal, right?
And real quick before we forget about this, and this is kind of already old news, but where do you think, or what did you think about the whole Aaron Rodgers situation?
So I originally thought that Aaron Rodgers was always going to come back to the Packers, but I thought he was going to negotiate an opt-out for a way that he'll come back this year, but he would be able to find a way to opt out and, find a way to go to his next team next year, however he wanted to. And it looks like the Packers are trying to say, hey, come back. And if you still want to leave after this year, we'll figure something out. We'll get you traded, which the way it was reported by Shefty and everyone, it seems like the Packers are just hoping that everything gets fixed. And I still don't think that's going to happen. I think after next season's over, regardless, Packers could win the Super Bowl, I think Aaron Rodgers still wants out. I think too much damage has been done. Rodgers knew that he couldn't not play for them this year, but he knew he could make a lot of noise, and that's what he did. And I do think that he won't be playing for them the year after. I'm hoping he doesn't play for them the year after. But I do think he'll be on his way out. Where is he going to go now? I'm not sure. It looks like Denver is still primed to have a position for him to have him. Looks like Vegas might be primed to get him. Even a team like the Vikings, which would be extremely ironic if somehow Aaron Rodgers goes to the Vikings and finishes his career. But a team like the Vikings looks like they can, because I think they adjusted Kirk Cousins' contract. So I think they could even find a way to get out of that Kirk Cousins horrible contract and try to acquire Aaron Rodgers. I don't know if the Packers would trade him within the division, but it seems like the Packers gave him all the assurances that if you want to leave, we will send you wherever you want to go. So, I need Aaron Rodgers to leave the Packers. So that's kind of like how I'm just waiting for him to be gone.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a matter of like, I don't disagree with Nabil in that, like, if the Packers do win or have a lot of success this upcoming season, that Aaron Rodgers is out. I think that's a foregone conclusion that he is done playing for the Packers organization after this season, no matter what. However, I do think like they're kind of in a good place in that like everybody knows what's going on, right? There's no chatter about this and that, and this report came out before the game and this report came out after the game. Like, we all know going into this season, Aaron Rodgers is unhappy, but when he goes out there to play on the field, you don't have to ask that question after the press conference every single game. Like, you already know the answer is, dude, I'm unhappy. And you go back to my very first press conference of camp. I told you exactly why I'm unhappy. Like, we just beat the Bears 23-17 at Lambeau Field and are first place in the division. Like, I don't need to talk about why I'm unhappy with this organization. I need to talk about Devontae Adams did a great job today. Aaron Jones did a great job today. Scantling did a great job today. Like the play calling was good today. So I think by putting all that stuff out there, he can focus on getting the job done. And if we know anything about Aaron Rodgers, that he's probably going to get the job done. I don't know. I don't want to jump too ahead of your segments. I don't know if we're going to talk about this, but my personal opinion, I think the Packers are going to be back in the NFC Championship game this year. And this is the year they finally break through, actually. I think Aaron Rodgers is going to say, like, you know what? Watch me. Just watch me do it. And whatever happened last year in the NFC Championship game about, we're going to settle for the field goal instead of going for two or going for it. No, dude, that's not happening this year because we saw what happened when we put the ball and the decision in your hands, coach. Let me do what I do and be Aaron Rodgers and do Aaron Rodgers things. Now, his other guys can't drop a wide open 2-point conversion in the end zone, right? That's not on the coaching. That's not on the quarterback. That's on the players on the field. But I think essentially it's all or nothing for Aaron Rodgers this year. And I think they're going to have a whole lot of something at the end of the season.
Yeah, and I think the only way Aaron Rodgers returns to the Packers next year if they make the Super Bowl. And I think it's not like the NFC, I don't think is as deep as the AFC because we all know the AFC is stacked with the Chiefs, the Bills, the Ravens, even the Titans are really good. You got the Browns and Chargers that could be really good wild card teams or even teams that could actually win the division. But I really think the Packers, I think they have a good chance of making the NFC Championship game, but the only way I think Aaron Rodgers returns if they make the Super Bowl. And I mean, really outside the Packers, there's the Buccaneers and Rams that are really their biggest threat. But it's not like the AFC where there's a plethora of teams that are just so good. So I could see the Packers making the AFC Championship game. I just don't know if I can actually see them pulling out in the Super Bowl. And if Aaron Rodgers does get traded, I mean, I feel like he'd be in a worse situation because the Broncos and Raiders, the Broncos are decent, and the Raiders, though, they don't have a whole lot there either. So, I mean, a lot can happen in 1 year, but I just think that Rodgers at the moment is going to have to stay in Green Bay. And I think he eventually will get traded. I just don't know what team next year if they don't make the Super Bowl. And do you guys have an early Super Bowl prediction for this season?
Let's see.
Well,
yeah, obviously the Bears. Obviously.
Bears versus Falcons. That's why our podcast exists, because we thought about
can't
this
even
4
happen,
years
sir.
ahead of the future. Yeah, right. Exactly. We preempted it. Right. No, well, yeah, that's true. But NFC Championship game weekend, it's on, that game is just going to end in a tie, and then that's it. And then we'll go to like NCAA, college football, NFL junior, whatever. But no, bring it back. Because Nabil can think about it, I'll just say, like I said, I think the Packers are going to do it. I think this is the year that they're going to break through and get it done because they are on the mission. And my dark horse, even though it's not really a dark horse, it's what I wanted to see last year. It's what I thought we were going to see last year. I think it's going to be Packers versus Bills, actually. I think that's going to be the Super Bowl this year.
Yeah,
that is possible, unless I'm wrong, Nabil. That is possible.
To be honest with you, after the Rams acquired Matt Stafford, I really like the Rams' chances. In the AFC, I mean, the Chiefs would be the obvious choice, but I really like what the Ravens are doing. If the Ravens can just if their receivers don't drop passes, I think they have a good chance of actually making the Super Bowl this year. But again, they seen their 0-3. Well, Lamar Jackson's 0-3 versus the Chiefs. So he's got to figure out a way to beat Kansas City in order to finally make that Super Bowl or at least win another playoff game. And again, as we're running out of time here, do you guys have anything else you want to add before we end the interview?
Everyone draft J.K. Dobbins this year in fantasy.
Nabil is our reigning fantasy champion. I hate to admit it, but I only say that not to stroke his ego, but to show you, to back up his statement. He knows what he's talking about. So draft J.K. Dobbins if you can. My only other thing is we're at Bears, Birds, and Brews. JJ, thank you for having us so much, man. This was fun. I hope your listeners enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed it. And Nabil and I would love to have you on our podcast. You and Nabil have been coordinating, so we'll get that coordinated. But yeah, we'd love to have you on Bears, Birds, and Brews. And anytime you're in Atlanta, dude, I don't know where you are, but if you ever come down here, we'll go get some beer. Maybe we can go watch a game or something. So just let us know.
Yeah, I heard Mercedes-Benz Stadium is really nice, and I heard the concessions are pretty cheap, which is really cool, and you don't see that a lot of places. So yeah, again, I'd love to come on. And again, thanks for wanting to come on. And again, you can check out the Bears, Birds, and Brews podcast. You guys are on. You guys are on
Apple,
like
Spotify?
Okay.
Apple,
Everywhere.
Spotify.
Okay.
Everywhere. Yeah.
And then for social media, is it just Instagram, Twitter? I mean, Facebook, maybe
Yeah.
TikTok or something like that.
Instagram and Twitter, Bears, Birds, and Brews.
Okay.
Facebook as well. We are on Facebook as well.
Okay.
Expanding.
I'll put that link down in the description below. All right. Again, thanks for coming on, guys, and enjoy the season.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to the Sports Town Podcast, or the STP Pod for short. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and much more. Also, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Sports Town Podcast. If you want to check out more videos of the Sports Town Podcast, click on the right.